there's a lot of guests who I know, obviously, because I've worked with them or I see them every day here, but it's sitting down and having conversations about things and not having a script. I've got the questions that I know I want to ask, but my follow-up questions are true and genuine, and they are because I want to know. I want to know more. And I know that I think I know that these listeners probably want to hear that too. So
Yeah.
it's been able to sit down and just have a conversation like we are today of just talking about this stuff and the topics that I feel like aren't talked about enough. Or I know when I was just starting off as a youngin' with my first bank account, what did I want to know? So
Yeah.
that's been my favorite part so far.
The Digital Banking Podcast is powered by Typhon. Typhon is the creator of Infinia, a dramatically better digital banking platform for community financial institutions, as well as several platform-agnostic, revenue-generating point solutions. Our highly configurable platform and broad ecosystem of third-party partners ensure our entire suite is scalable and extensible to meet the needs of any FI. On our podcast, you will hear host Josh DeTar discuss today's most pressing financial technology topics with seasoned industry experts from every possible discipline.
You know, your podcast hasn't officially made it until there's ads in it. But this is one you're not going to want to skip past. And, well, if you do, feel free to hit that fast forward 15 seconds button twice. Ever wonder what gives me my energy and enthusiasm during these podcasts? You know, outside of my relentless desire to learn about, connect, share, and build up community FIs and their mission to support the communities they serve? It's coffee, and lots of it. Now, you want to know what's better than your regular old coffee? How about donating $5 to the Children's Miracle Network hospitals through Credit Unions for Kids every time you purchase high-quality, ethically sourced coffee that also provides living wages to coffee farmers? So if you want to listen to this episode with epic levels of caffeine-induced focus and help kids in need, head to javaforkids.org to learn more and buy a bag or 10. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me on here and letting me kind of revisit my glory days. I don't get to revisit the story of how I got into this industry very often. So it's been fun to kind of to revisit that. So thank you. But my banking days, I guess, started, something just popped into my mind. When I was little, I used to play bank, and I would like make my dad bring checks into my little office. So I always knew I kind of wanted to be like a banker or something around those lines in an office setting. So it's actually funny to look at where I am right now, because I do remember wanting to work in a bank or playing bank when I was little, which was pretty funny. Yeah. But with P1FCU, my dad had an account when I want to say he was in high school. It was as early as he could get an account. He got an account. So when it was time for me to get my own bank account, let's go to P1FCU. It's all we know. Community credit union. So I just said, what, let's do it. Brought my graduation money into the Warner branch here in Lowson and deposited all my money, the biggest amount of money I've ever seen. And a gal I was close with, who was the VP here at the time, she said, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't really know, because I feel like I'm a baby. I feel like I don't know how to have a job." And she said, "We'll work with your schedule." She knew I was going to play basketball at Lewis Clark State College. And she said, "Just work when you can. We'll work with you. Just show up and we'll have a drawer for you." So I said, "Why not?" It was my foot in the door. Be fun to make some extra change. And I had no idea that it would roll out to what it has to today. So yeah, I started as a teller, working whenever I didn't have basketball, and worked my way up to cash management officer in business services. So I've worked in mortgage lending. I've worked in marketing. I've filled in as a greeter, helping in titles, just doing random things, which now has really benefited me when it comes to assisting in miscellaneous projects or really anything that I'm needed for. I have pretty good insight. So I'm really thankful for the push to get a job.
To get a job. Well, what
Yeah,
I
here
think
at the
is,
credit union.
I feel like you glossed over an important part of this whole story. And I think it's the part that makes it unique. Cause I feel like I said, there's like so many people, when I ask them, as a part of the podcast, like, hey, how did you get into credit unions? Like, I feel like
Yeah.
everybody's answer is like, I don't know, I stumbled into this. Like, I
Yeah,
will say not
literally.
many people are like, I grew up as a kid wanting to be a banker. I don't
I
get that
know,
very
right?
often.
That's
But
unique.
what I think is really cool is, so through your time in college, so they actually used you as like a marketing promo, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
And
that's
that's
what like got
something
you really into the credit
uh,
union.
it sure did. So through a little piece of that story I didn't tell was my senior year, we won state and it was the first time since like the 70s or something. So it was really, really important for our community to kind of highlight on that. Really cool thing, especially for girls sport.
Mhm.
And P1FCU utilized the opportunity for sure. And we did a few commercial shoot and our VP of marketing, he was there for it, the different company at the time, but he filmed me when I stepped on the court as a freshman at Lewis Clark State College. We got to film a fun little promo for, I think it was for a new debit card that we had at the time. Oh no, it was online banking. We were launching online banking. And I was doing kind of like a promo video of how to use that anywhere, anytime. And it's really cool to go back and watch that because they were able to utilize me in those ways. And now I'm, joining them in a capacity where I get to kind of do the same type of thing, but just in a way more important way. So my involvement in the credit union from a very young age was pretty cool to look back on for sure.
So one, do you have like an ROI dashboard, Tanis, that shows like how many people have become members from your campaign, or like how?
I'm sure there has been. I could probably dig up that data. I know that they showed those videos in the one movie theater they have here in the Valley, which I know you're familiar with. And they showed them in the previews of the movie theater. So I was known as the girl on the commercials for a long time.
That's hilarious. I know. I need to go back. So, fun aside, or random. So, I actually graduated from high school there in Lewiston, Clarkston, too. So, it's a small town and right on the border of Washington and Idaho. So, yeah, there's the one movie theater. And now that brings me to point number two, which is, now I want to see the dashboard for your YouTube video hits after this podcast. I want to see a bunch of people going out and
Oh
trying
my
to find this.
gosh. That is actually so funny because, yeah, it's still there. You could still find them and you just Google my name and P1FCU and you'll get a link to the video. Baby Tanis will pop up.
Baby Tanis. Well, I mean, that I say that it's, even whether you're in a small town or a big town, right? It's cool to see the credit union, like you said, like finding things that are actually really deeply rooted in the credit union and kind of attaching, or not the credit union, sorry, the community, and attaching to that. So it's cool to see that they recognized, hey, it's pretty neat that, like, your team went to state for the first time in what, like 30 years or something crazy. And
Yeah.
that was monumentous, right? Like that was
Yeah.
big. That was something for the community to get excited about. It was cool to highlight, women's sports. And so like they
Yeah.
were able to do that, and one, shine some light on, the team and the town and all of that, but also kind of just
Absolutely.
a reminder to the community there in Lewiston, Clarkston, like, hey, we're here and we're paying attention.
Mhm.
And people that are
Mhm.
part of our community and a part of our, sports teams, like, they also work here at the credit union and they're here to kind of support and serve you. I think that's cool that they thought to think about that and actually do something with it.
Absolutely. And it's still that way. There's still fun, marketing promotions and projects and things that they do now that showcases local athletes or local with our scholarship program and all sorts of other connections we have with the local schools in the communities that we serve. they're still showcasing some of our, local athletes and students, which I think is really such a neat thing. Like you said, it truly is the meat and potatoes of what a credit union is and what we believe in and who we are to our core. And we're never going to lose that. That's one thing that can't be taken away is we're never going to lose that feel because unless field of membership ever changes and rules on that ever changes, I mean, the direct communities that we serve are pouring into the credit union. So it's completely community based. And that is really what I've grown to love and appreciate so much as I've gotten older. And I did leave town and came back. I'm a return offender. I left to go experience the real world and moved to Spokane, Washington, and realized I am not a city girl. I'm like kind of a city girl, but not really. I need to go home. And came home, and it just makes sense. And I don't know if I could ever work for another place that doesn't have that community first foundation.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of brings it back around for you, right? When you were talking about for you, it's really important to see people, right? And kind of be there for them, both in the good times, the bad, in a genuine way. And, we
Absolutely.
talk about time and time again, the differentiator for credit unions being that, people build relationships and they actually look out for and care for people. And, people who've listened to this podcast are no stranger to my personal story in credit unions. And, fun fact, the credit union that saved me is there in Lewiston too, right? A small credit union there. And it was because somebody, when I came in, like saw the look on my face and said, that's a person that needs a conversation. That's not a transaction.
Right.
And I needed a conversation, and I needed a friend and they were there for me. And that's a part of your story too, right? Like when that's so much of a part of your DNA, I'm sure that for you, as you went through that whole process of, just getting a job for job's sake at the credit union, and then starting to be involved in some of the marketing collateral and seeing like, oh, this is cool. Like they're actually taking an interest in, what our basketball team is doing. And they're actually looking at ways that could be a part of their community messaging. Did that start to kind of trigger those things for you saying, oh, you know what, maybe this isn't just a job. Like this is what I really want to do because this is where I can leave my mark and my impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would say I started feeling that. I worked as a community relationship specialist for a short time in marketing, and I did that up north. So it was definitely an area of need. We didn't have that position up there at the time. So I got to, when I moved, they said, all right, here you go. Here's some swag. Get up there and do your thing. So I got to go up there and there was some things that we were always a part of, just the branches and the branch managers there had established our presence there. So that part, those bigger events, those bigger organizations we were a part of, that was easy. But it was finding the nooks and crannies and the other nonprofits and other organizations that, like we really need to be involved in this. And that was what I was there for. It was designed for me to go and find the gaps, fill the gaps. So that was really fun. That's where I did meet new people. I got us involved in things that I see that we're still involved with today, which is really neat to see because it's valuable organizations and valuable missions that we're a part of. It's been neat to see that we're still continuing that support and partnership. But with the people that I met and learning the things that I did along that journey, that was really lovey-dovey. That position was lovey-dovey. I got to sit with founders of nonprofits that share their story and why they got these organizations off the ground and what they do and how it affects the community. And it was amazing to, hear. And it was also heartbreaking because a lot of those stories came from tragic loss or, a terrible need for something. And that's why they want to help others. So that was a really neat position to be in. I do not regret that position at all. I ended up switching gears just because I am pretty lovey-dovey. I call it my lovey-dovey side. And then my office girl side where I like numbers and organization and figuring out solutions and writing procedure and all of that stuff. That I'm kind of a nerd on that side of things too. So I jumped into mortgage lending, and that compassion that I had for others really, 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 really flowed through to that, because nothing gets more personal than needing a home equity or wanting to purchase your first home or
Yeah.
refinancing for whatever reason, and having to ask all the hard questions. There's a lot that goes into that transaction, and diving in and getting really granular with someone's finances opens up a lot of doors for vulnerable conversation. Members have to be vulnerable in those instances. And as hard as it is, I felt like I was a really good person for that. I was able to sit down and it's okay. We've got, we've got all the time in the world. Like this is what I'm here for. So I feel like that was my time in mortgage was absolutely where I learned that my personal, I would say, I guess, pillars, my
Yeah.
personal pillars really did align with my career. And not that it doesn't now, but I would say in that intimate role, I feel like it did more than now, where I'm trying to help businesses and find solutions for them so that they can conduct business and run their business in a more efficient manner. It's not so personal.
Well, I want to park that and kind of come back to it a little bit
Yeah.
later. It's kind of funny too, because you were saying that the first ads that like you did as a basketball player for the credit union were even around digital banking and like using digital
Yeah.
banking to self-service. But at the
Isn't that
same time,
funny?
then like what really drove you deep into the credit union and credit union mission was the really like, heavy hitting in-person relationship building type of conversations. And
Mhm.
again, one thing that hopefully people who are, listeners of the podcast won't be strangers to is that I fully support the notion that branches will never go away, should never go away, that people will never go away, no matter how many tools or processes or automations or AI we get. Like there's a time and a place that the human element is so necessary. And I'd love to get
Mhm.
your perspective on just how things have changed in that and how you see them changing, not just on the consumer side, but like you were saying, even just moving into the business role. Like,
Mhm.
what are those times where the real in-person stuff kind of, builds a deeper relationship, and what's the opportunity for that for credit unions? The
Mhm.
other thing that I want to kind of just put a bug in your ear and come back to is, you were talking about your journey into credit unions starting in, high school and then going into college and then being actively recruited to participate in, putting together marketing collateral. I would love to say whoever at your credit union was responsible for that is a genius, because I think it's such a missed opportunity in the same regard that credit unions just are not talking to and building up our youth and
Mhm.
getting them excited about credit unions. Look, I make very generalizing statements on the podcast. Like, don't shoot me for this, but I know there's a
No.
lot of credit unions doing a lot of good in high schools and things like that. But I would say by
Mhm.
and large, as an industry, we're not doing enough, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're getting people excited at that level, that's what's helping to bring on the next generation of membership. So I
Mhm.
think those are two topics I'd really love to kind of come back to with you, Tanis.
For
But while we're on this subject of, talking about kind of the touchy-feely and the involvement with the community and how your, kind of professional career has evolved through the credit union, the whole reason I asked you to come and be on the podcast is I saw a LinkedIn post. I try and follow all of our credit unions, at least as many as I can find on LinkedIn. And, I saw a post from your credit union that you guys were starting a podcast. And then I saw that you were going to be the host. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. Because again, I think that, you know, we need to be talking to members and prospective members where they are, and it's
Mhm.
not where they were. And so a
Mhm.
lot of times we look at things like I pick on TikTok, right? Because it's the easy one to pick on. But if you're like, oh, we're not going to market on TikTok. Well, I hate to break it to you, but your prospective members, your next generation of members, they're on TikTok. Right.
Right.
And so I get really excited to see credit unions that are like branching out and doing things that are new and different and saying, hey, look, we recognize that there's a large swath of people that listen to
Mhm.
podcasts. Probably not this one because I host it, but there's people that do listen to other podcasts.
For sure.
And And you guys are like, hey, this is a great place where we could put some content that could actually provide value. So tell us a little bit about your podcast. Like, tell us about P1's
Yeah,
podcast, how this started. Like, I want the whole juicy, how did this get going and how's it become what it is today?
absolutely. Well, I can't take any of the credit for the development of it, honestly, because our marketing team is phenomenal and they really truly dreamt this idea and brought it to life. They did all of the research, figured out target audiences, who's watching our stuff, all the analytics. They really paid attention to all of that as they do and really found, what is it going to be? What are we going to call it? Who are we going to have host? Um, we wanted it to be a relatable thing and we wanted it to be something that isn't structured similar to your podcast. It's casual, just friends sitting down and chatting. It's nothing scripted or it's obviously guided a little bit because like you mentioned, we can get off track for sure, but it's a podcast that just makes sense. So the name
I like that.
of that podcast, yes, it's Making Sense of Money is the podcast. And it is truly aligned with what we believe in, which is financial well-being for all. So we are wanting to meet all of our members and non-members. We're just wanting to provide education and guidance to anyone that can listen to really meet them where they are, whether that's tips and tricks on how to save money for your first car or grocery shopping on a budget or buying your first home, financial planning for the future. I mean, we truly are inviting guests that are not only subject matters, but have the experience that maybe they can share something with our listeners that will make a difference in their life and hopefully help them make sense of money. It's really designed to be, I love it because I feel like I get to be like the big sister. I'm trying to be the
Yeah.
big sister and be able to like, you know what? This is what I learned. This is what I did. It was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. And now, what happened? What kind of negative impact did that have on me because of that decision? But I didn't know. I didn't have anybody to, other than my dad, I didn't have anybody to guide me through that. So I really love that I get to be the big sister and host these guests and be, the one that they trust to guide conversation on meeting our listeners where they're at in their financial journey. It's important. It's very
That's
important.
so cool.
Yeah. And we get to invite community partners. So we've hosted someone from our local food bank and they specifically educate on the topic of, you know, eating healthy on a budget, things of that nature. So that was a really cool partnership
That's super
because
cool.
the education was, I was taking notes. I was like, this is great. How do we learn more? How do we get a hold of you? So the people that we have on our podcast are not only subject matter experts, but they're heavily involved in the communities that we serve and can provide input and expertise to their talent. It's really talent.
Yeah, I know. Tanis and I were joking about this before we started recording that like I make the joke that I'm the perfect podcast host because I'm an idiot, but I'm just like a genuinely curious idiot. And so, I'm with you. Like, it's so cool to bring on these different subject matter experts that like this is their thing and they know it
Mhm.
inside and out and they're so good at it. And every time I bring somebody like that onto the podcast, yeah, I'm like furiously taking notes. Oh, I needed to
Yeah,
learn that like for myself. Like, you know what I mean?
right.
And so
Absolutely.
you get to have such unique conversations with people where, when somebody's really passionate about something like you, right? Like it's so obvious that you're like ridiculously passionate about this. And when somebody's this
Yeah.
passionate about something, like I want to hear what they have to say about it. I know I'm going to learn something from that conversation.
Right.
And then it's
Absolutely.
cool that you get to share that with others. And I think
Mhm.
that's what people are clamoring for good financial information. And there's tons out there. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, I see it all the time. And like, I've even started to follow some of these people just to see like what we're up against. But Tanis, I mean, if you go on social media, there's people that are offering financial advice, but it's what is their driving motivator? And it's to get more views so they can make more money. Like their financial advice is help me make more money. You know what I mean? And so some of this stuff is just so clickbaity. Some of this stuff is
Right.
like wildly wrong. I was recently reading a report that was talking about how prevalent this actually is, that young people will go out and like rent through like Turo or something, like a Lamborghini. They'll get like a fake Rolex or something like that. And they'll put together these whole videos, like parked in front of somebody else's mansion, talking about how they got rich with, their 3-step advice. And you just need to buy their advice or whatever, or follow their advice or
Oh,
follow them
geez.
on YouTube and you can be like them. And it's like, and they could barely make the Turo payment to rent the Lamborghini. Right. But they're
Mhm.
putting on this facade of success. And I'm like, that kind of stuff's genuinely scary to me. Right. Because
Absolutely.
all of a sudden they're providing what could be really detrimental advice to somebody that they're
Mhm.
actually going to follow. Could you imagine being a 23-year-old kid and seeing some other 23-year-old kid driving a Lamborghini and saying, all you need to do is buy these couple of different, meme coins that I've bought just like me, and you'll be rich like me
Mhm.
too. And all of a sudden, this poor 23-year-old, exhausts their savings, goes completely broke and can't make, their rent that month. Like those are real problems. And so I
Mhm.
think it's such a cool opportunity that folks like you and your credit union are stepping up and saying, hey, you know what? Like we're going to provide some content too, because our motivator, like our driver is not that. Like, yeah, don't get
Mhm.
us wrong. Like we want to attract new members, but it's so we can serve those members and help improve their
Right.
financial lives and positions. That's just such a
Yeah.
different value proposition than like some YouTuber.
Oh, for sure. No, it absolutely is. And another like important thing with that is it's not always going to look the same. Like the way that we
Mhm.
communicate with our members is never going to look the same. Just like back in 2011, it was, we were just kind of, the online banking stuff was really launching. And that's how we get to people is through YouTube and commercials. And that was really kind of it, right? I mean, maybe Facebook, but
Oh man,
now it's like, here
MySpace.
we are. Yeah, MySpace. I don't even think, I think maybe MySpace said goodbye at that point, but now it's like things are always going to change. Podcasts are kind of the new way of the world, really. It's where a lot of, middle-aged people and maybe even, I know that my dad and my grandfather, they are like, what's a podcast? Or, how would I even find that? Like, what is the app store? Like, so there's definitely a demographic, but it's available to everyone. It's the way, it's a way of getting information that is new, but so effective and
Mhm.
so different than what we're used to. I mean, it's fun conversation. It's good conversation. It's casual. It's relatable. And, it's a bummer that there's things out there, ill information being passed to our youth because that's where it starts. And that's a bummer.
Yeah. No, and I love that you guys are doing it too in kind of the unscripted long form conversation type of thing
Yeah.
too. Because I think that, that's kind of why we started this podcast to be that way too, is I think about the way that I like to consume content, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely. Like there's certain things that I want the quick hit, right? Like I want to just give me the chat GPT summary of it. I just need the bullet
Right.
points. Side note, I started this whole thing. It started as a joke that I knew I could make because I know him well enough that I knew how he would take it. But it started as a joke post against Ron Shevlin. And every year he produces with Cornerstone, like this massive report that, hey, if you're listening and you're in our industry and you have not read Cornerstone's and Ron's report, like do yourself a favor,
Mhm.
go read this report. But it's massive, right? And one of the guys on my team jokingly was like, hey, I don't have time to read this thing. I'm too lazy. So I just ran it through Chat GPT and said, give me the summary.
Oh
He
my gosh.
absolutely still read the whole thing, right? But we were joking about it. I screenshot his Slack to me of like, I'm too lazy. I ran it through Chat GPT and I posted it for Ron to read. But my point with all of that is that like, there's some times where I want like the Chat GPT summary, but there's some things like Ron's report where I'm like, no, you need the context of this whole thing. Like I want the whole
Right.
thing. I need to read all of this. I don't want just the
Right.
bullet points because there's nuance to this. And I think when we're having conversations with people so many times, for whatever reason, right? Like if you just get the snippets of it, you may only take so much of it, or you may have one opinion of the person or the topic or whatever it may be. But I think a lot of times when you get the opportunity to really explain yourself and talk long form about it and provide,
Mhm.
the back details and, the story around all of that, I think it changes things. So when you're having conversations with people about, providing financial advice from a credit union, like just having kind of that foundation and that context. But then once you get somebody to actually listen into the podcast, they're like, oh, wow, like I actually get the full explanation. I get to hear, Tanis just having a conversation and hearing her genuine curiosity. And
Right.
I wanted to ask that same question. I just didn't have somebody to ask it to. And now I
Right.
get to hear the long answer.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's that relationship. It's not something you can get everywhere, and it's the relationship piece that truly is very, very unique and special. And I'm so happy that I get to be trusted to be able to have these conversations and be able to contribute to this movement because it is very important. And it's stuff that I would hope that my sons grow up listening to or tuning into to learn more, educate themselves better. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, isn't that? I feel like you can dork out on this with me. Like, especially being a parent of young kids, I'm like, hey, look, no shade against like you, my dad, or,
Mhm.
I didn't get good financial education growing up.
Right.
And so I made a bunch of mistakes and I got saved thankfully by a credit union. I don't know where I'd be without that though, Tanis. Like,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that's a genuine, like weird fear of mine. And so now looking at it as a parent, I'm like, I don't want to pass down those same mistakes to my kids, right? Like I want
Right.
to teach my kids good financial habits. But this is what I do. This is literally my job, is to work in this
Right.
industry. So I'm doing it day in and day out. I'm inundated with good quality, positive content and people. So my kids
Mhm.
will always go, grow up in that environment.
It's
But
true.
that's not the vast majority of America, right? Like the vast
Right.
majority of America is more like your and my original stories, right?
Mhm.
Of like, hey, I got to fiddle fart through this thing and figure it out.
Mhm.
And now with,
Learn the hard
so
way.
much access to, yeah. And with so much access to potentially really crummy advice, now not only are you like having to try and get advice in the first place, but now you're having to sort through like what's real and what's not. And
Right. I
hard.
know. That's the bad thing. I find myself using some social media engines as like my new search engine, my new Google. And I'll do that with TikTok. I'll start using it as like my search engine, but it's like, holy
Mhm.
cow, what can you trust on this thing? Like
Mhm.
it is so hard to find accurate information that's not an opinion or a, like this is what works for me type thing. And you can't do that with finances. You just can't. Financial
I know.
guidance, you cannot rely on things like TikTok or avenues like TikTok because it's just not accurate information.
Well, and that's why I love that you guys are putting this out as like this is a part of your corporate strategy, right?
Mhm.
I was just meeting with one of our SVP of engineering who's a PhD in AI and like 10
Mhm.
billion times more intelligent than I am, Tanis. And and he was showing me how easily he could recreate political figures
Oh
and deep
my.
fake videos and like make them say whatever he wanted. And he was
Terrifying.
like, this is what's out there. He's right. He's like, and he was using it as kind of a public service announcement of like, hey, it's really important to like
Yikes.
trust the source and same kind of thing, right? Like it's so easy to just to put on fake content that serves a very specific purpose. And
Right.
so my hope is that as people start to learn, especially within, your community, that they can go to you for a trusted resource. Like, hey, I know I can just always go to P1 and like
Mhm.
I can listen to the podcast. That's one I can subscribe to. And like there's not going to be any
Right.
shenanigans. Like I don't need to
Right.
like can I trust this content, or can I trust this guest, or like, hey, they've vetted this, they've thought about this, they produced this as good quality content for me that
Right.
is going to actually improve my financial position or health, right? Like,
Totally.
being able to kind of have that foundation to stand on, I think, is important today.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if one of us if we're not sure exactly the answer to your question, we will always find someone who does. There's never usually a time where we say, I'm so sorry, I can't help you, without even being like, here's who we think you should call, even if it's just somewhere to start.
Yeah. Well, so how do you go about sourcing? Like, how do you guys decide what kind of content, guests you want on? How are you finding guests? Like,
Yeah.
what's
So
kind of the central theme of how you run that?
yeah, again, I didn't have much. I've had some insight. We did have, some meetings before deciding what topics we were going to, we identified what needs that we need to focus on. But the marketing team really just has it so dialed in. They had a whole agenda for the whole year, pretty much planned out of, what topics are popular, what gets their most clicks, what kind of data they've pulled that would help aid in deciding on what type of topics. There are some of
Cool.
the ones that are just meat and potatoes with education and financial education, first time home buying tips. Grocery shopping on a budget was a big one just because today's economy, that's kind of a situation that we're all dealing with, things are changing
Dude,
and
I
it's
need
not
tips on just how to afford eggs right now.
honestly. So, and that's exactly it, is the topics that marketing really, really, really dives into with the ideas that they have for a shoot is relevant. It has to be relevant, because then what's the point? We have guests that are internal, external. So the external are community partners, like I mentioned before, that would benefit not only the topic that we're aiming to discuss, but also that serves as support for the community for any type of need that they might have. I keep using her as an example, but the gal that we had for the food bank, that was a fantastic plug for the food bank, because there are probably people out there who don't know where to start if they are struggling with where do they go for their Thanksgiving meal, or, need help, or didn't realize that the food bank also provides dog food and formula. You know,
Hmm.
that was huge, not only to give exposure to how to go to Walmart and how to plan to go to Walmart on a budget and get exactly what you need for your family of four. But also those people can look in and be like, wow, I didn't know that the food bank did all of that. And then, kind of go on a little rabbit hole of the food bank and how do I support that? Or, wow, I can just call her. I can just call it right now. I can just call them and go there. And, maybe I want to volunteer. It's so much more than just educating on a specific topic, but it also is a partnership with that guest on supporting the community in two birds, one stone in a way. The other topics that we do discuss are important topics that go along with lending, important things in the industry that can be symbolized for our younger audiences to understand, uh, information about interest rates, discussions about the market, and, what does it mean when people say this or that. It's really tailored to financial well-being for all, no matter your age or your financial situation. So I think the topics are really designed to be simple enough for you to understand whether or not you've purchased and sold six homes, or you're wanting to purchase your first home, whatever that looks like. So topics are relevant. Um, Topics make sense for our community, um, and topics are important to all, no matter what stage in life you're in. So I think that's where it really comes from. And it's not going to be a topic that could be controversial or open up cans of worms, something that we might not want to talk about, or, cause more questions for our listeners. We don't want them to be more confused when they tune off. So yeah.
That's a good point. I appreciate that you and like making that point, because I think that's part of the problem with like the just super short marketing snippety type stuff is a lot of times
Yeah.
it leaves people with more questions than answers and doesn't leave them with like a path to success out of that.
Right.
But being able to like talk about very specific use cases, I think that's super cool. You're talking about like the food bank stuff, right? Like, I didn't even know
Yeah.
that,
Right.
you could get dog food or formula at the
I
food
know.
bank. I had no
That's
idea,
what
right?
stood out to
But
me. I was
those
like,
are,
whoa.
yeah, because those are important things to people, right? I mean, you think about it,
Totally.
like if you're at a point where you're needing to say, like, I need to reach out for a hand and some help, and you're looking to the food bank for some food,
Hmm.
you may not even know that you could also ask for dog food or formula. Like, I didn't know. And
I know, right?
and just being able to even share that with people, right? Whether that benefits me personally or not, just being able to share that with someone else could benefit them. And to your point, like, I think that's what's super cool about podcasts is there's this weird, like incredible, like cross-pollination that happens out of it.
Hmm.
And yeah, to your point, like you're getting value for you and the credit union by creating some really valuable content.
Right.
It's fulfilling your mission as a credit union.
Hmm.
It's hopefully helping your members or future members. But two, at the same time, you just gave the food bank a bunch of free advertising, right?
Totally.
And there could be somebody
Absolutely.
that's listening that, needed a bag of dog food. There could also be somebody who's sitting there going, hey, you know what? Like we have a budget that we set aside monthly to do, donations for nonprofits. And I never thought about the food bank, and maybe now I'll donate to
Right.
the food bank, right? So
Totally.
like there's
Right.
just this weird cross-pollination that happens out of that. I think it's super cool.
Absolutely. And also too, like it takes some of like there could be a little bit of, I don't want to say like embarrassment by any means, but if you're someone who's in a situation where you are not used to being put in that situation, and let's say you're having trouble putting your pride aside and being like accepting the fact that you do need help,
Mm.
I think it's comforting that we're having these conversations and we take away kind of brings more of that relatability aspect of it. And it's like, wow, okay, like they're talking
Yeah.
about it, like they're pushing it, like maybe it's not so embarrassing. Like, it, it, I think that also brings a little tidbit to it too. Or like saving, we touch on some of our episodes, we talk about how no amount is too little. If you
Yeah.
can't save anything other than $5 that month, like that's a celebration. That's better than nothing. And a lot of people are like, man, I only got to save like $20 this month. And I'm like, that's freaking
Good for
awesome.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of also a way of hoping to reach people and letting them feel okay when they feel like they're doing the bare minimum. Sometimes the bare minimum is okay. And I think it's really comforting. Some of the things that we talk about and the relatability of it, I think is really comforting.
That's so true. That's an interesting way to think about it too, Tanis, because you think about, again, like I think about my own example, and I had to hit rock bottom and basically be pushed into an uncomfortable conversation, right? And that's really hard.
Yeah.
And that
Right.
really sucks. And
Yeah.
so many times, like before we hit the point where we have to have help, or we just
Mhm.
kind of needed help, or could have really used some help. So, I feel like so many times we're, to your point, like we're almost ashamed or embarrassed to ask the questions. And for
Right.
whatever reason, like that always takes place in like our health, right?
Mhm.
Like, I really don't want to ask if this is normal or bad, or I can just deal with
Right.
it. But it's also in our financial health. And I think so many times we get, embarrassed to say like, hey, I wasn't able to save more than $20 this month. So I just saved zero. And like, I just don't want to talk about it with anyone.
Right.
And, even just asking them to come to a safe and trusted place like the credit union and have that conversation, even that might be a stretch, right?
Mhm.
I mean, those are the kinds of conversations we don't even want to have with our spouses sometimes, let
Right.
alone with somebody even at the credit union that means well. But
Right.
being able to have that conversation on your podcast
Mm.
and like hear this guest talking about it, and then hearing you as a leader of a credit union in their local community being like, dude, that's awesome. You could save $20 that month. Like, no,
Right.
that should be celebrated. You
Mhm.
know, then they're like, okay, cool. Like I wanted to ask that question, but I didn't want to ask that question.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things with finances and, especially personal finances that there's a lot of, I think, pressure and intimidation. And like you said, a little bit of shame sometimes. And that's, that's one thing we should not be doing is, not welcoming those questions and not meeting our members or potential members where they're at and then empathizing with them. I mean, you have to have empathy when dealing with personal things with, but when it comes to money or anything personal, really in this industry, it's important. It's important for our members to not walk out the door feeling worse. And we all
Yeah.
have bad days. And I know it's not a perfect thing. We're all human, but I think that's one of the most important things when credit unions or when institutions in general, hire and put people in positions. At least empathy and meeting members where they're at is a skill that can't really be taught. So it's important to think about who they're putting in these roles to assist and guide and educate, because I can sit here and train about digital banking and mortgage and business, this or that, cash management, this or that. And it, you can't do that with empathy
Yeah.
and, meeting our members where they're at, meeting people where they're at.
So I got it. So that's why you got put to be the host of the podcast then, huh?
I
Going back
mean,
to
maybe,
your
maybe.
intro. Yeah.
Yeah, that and I think middle-aged women might be our most attentive listeners.
Really?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's part of the analytics
Cool.
of that. Yeah, we have, you know, mothers. One of our episodes is one of our lending team members. She's a new mom, and that was kind of the focus point of that episode was how to juggle your finances with becoming a new parent. So another cool thing, that's a very real thing, whether you're a mom or a
Yeah.
dad or a grandparent or a guardian. That's a very relevant topic. So yeah, I think I did I was trusted with that position because my ability to do that, I think.
That's pretty rad.
Yeah. And I will brag about that because so one thing I want people to know about me, right? Like I
Yeah.
will brag about that. That's something that I did obviously study in school, but it was a core value of mine and still is. So yeah, I will brag.
So what's been your favorite part of doing the podcast then so far?
It's having the conversations.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guests who I know, obviously, because I've worked with them or I see them every day here, but it's sitting down and having conversations about things and not having a script. I've got the questions that I know I want to ask, but my follow-up questions are true and genuine, and they are because I want to know. I want to know more. And I think I know that these listeners probably want to hear that too. So
Yeah.
it's been able to sit down and just have a conversation like we are today of just talking about this stuff and the topics that I feel like aren't talked about enough. Or I know when I was just starting off as a youngin' with my first bank account, what did I want to know? So
Yeah.
that's been my favorite part so far. Believe it or not, I don't like to be behind the camera or in front of the camera. I don't at all. It's actually so anxiety ridden for me. It's not even funny. I had the biggest fear of public speaking, but put me out on a basketball court in front of millions of
Good
people,
to
and
go.
that's a different story. But I don't like to be in front of the camera. But like you said, you realized what something that filled your cup was having that interaction, and this is actually
Yeah.
important to you. I'm learning that as well in this time in my life because talking about this stuff and meeting the people that I've met, this is something that I truly feel passionate about.
Isn't that funny? Like how that happens? Because yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you. It's like, I almost never wanted to start this podcast.
Yeah.
And then, I I didn't even think it was ever going to actually turn into anything. But I'm glad you made that point, because I think it's really worth, like, if you're sitting there listening to Tanis and I talk, and you're with a credit union and you're thinking, why would we start a podcast? Like, P1FCU's got one. Oh, so-and-so's got one. There's so much content. There's people with 10 million followers on YouTube. Like, there's enough content. We don't need to compete with that. I would actually very strongly argue against, right? And Tanis is sitting here living proof. Like you're saying, like, there is a demographic of people that really are clamoring for your content and they want to listen to it. And you know what? It doesn't need to be 10 million people, right?
Right.
I mean, can I put, like, you validate this statement, right? But I would be, pretty reason to believe that if you had even just one of those, young moms listen to your podcast and their financial health and future and that of their new kids is better because of it, like, you probably say this whole darn thing was worth it.
Absolutely. We're just learning one new thing. Like one new thing. That's all, that's all we care about.
Yeah. See, that's a really cool way to put it. Like, just take one thing, like, from this whole thing, if they just take one thing away from it. And so I don't think we've saturated with content. Like, I think that there's still a huge opportunity for credit. And if anything, like, I would love to see that the financial services podcasting space was saturated with credit. I'd love to see 5,000 credit unions have podcasts and it make it so that being some, 19-year-old kid faking having a Lambo, like, gets buried behind all of the credit union content.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we could stitch their videos and be like, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Bad idea.
Yeah.
That's great.
I know, right? I'm like, marketing.
Tanis, I think you just started a TikTok for you and I. We'll do,
there we go.
When people like review other people's videos, we'll do that. We're like, no, see this? No, don't do that.
No. Oh gosh.
What are you most looking forward to with, like, the future of the podcast?
I am just excited for more external guests. And maybe that's just me being selfish, because our internal guests are amazing, obviously. And our listeners would benefit just as much by listening to, the tips and tricks about mortgages or starting a business or whatever that may be. But I'm really excited for more of our community partnership, maybe some nonprofits, and learning a little bit more myself about certain organizations that we support, we sponsor. I think that would be really cool, and kind of like learning about that process. There's not a lot that goes into kind of like the behind the scenes of nonprofits, like how it works, where does the money go, or how does that money movement work. And I think that that'd be a really cool thing to learn. But besides that, in the bigger picture, I'm just really excited to see who is benefited and to get feedback on how the podcast has impacted our listeners, numbers, whoever that may be. I think that would be really important to know, just because that's the main goal, right? I mean, the main goal is to be there and to offer support and guidance to those who need it. And to know that we're doing that would be really awesome. So that's what I'm looking forward the most, is some feedback.
Yeah. We'll kind of give you some right now, because you just gave me a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the idea of, like, talking to some of your community partners about starting nonprofits. We use the joke that we jumped out of the airplane and then started trying to figure out how to build a parachute.
Right.
And my wife and I had started a charity a few years ago.
Oh,
and
wow.
just figuring out all of those, like, the logistics of that. And like, how do you raise funds, and then where do they go?
Right.
And how do you pay your taxes, and
Totally.
all of these things? And it's like, hey, you take two, I'd like to think, well, at least one of us is very intelligent, my wife. I'm quasi-intelligent. I like to think the two of us can figure this out. But, like, it was a real struggle. It was a real struggle, right? And it was really hard to find just good, clean information about, hey, how do we do this? And then literally just the other day, I was taking an Uber home from the airport, and I got talking to this woman who was a single mom, crazy life story, Tanis. Like, her daughter was 4 and ended up with cancer, and, like, went through this whole thing. And out of all of this, what does she want to tell me as we're having this deep conversation that's like got me in tears in the back of a friggin' Uber on my way home, like 11
Literally.
o'clock at night? I'm like, cool. Is she's talking to me about like how she has started a nonprofit to bake cakes for kids. She's like a baker by training, and
Oh
she
my
makes these
gosh.
beautiful, like incredible cakes. And she started a charity to donate 100% of a cake, like a really cool, like, Spider-Man themed cake or
Sure.
something, to kids in the hospital with cancer. And I was like, that's
What an
so rad.
angel.
But that was her whole thing, is she's like, I just feel lost. She's like, I don't understand like how to actually manage the business side of this. So if you could get a podcast guest on your podcast to talk
Yeah,
about like just what
totally.
it's like to start from the ground up, because I think to your point, right? Like so many of these nonprofits and different community groups and things, they start out of a real need or something
Mhm.
tragic. And like, that's
Yeah,
a really motivating thing for somebody. And when you're super passionate about the outcome, but you're really unsure of the process, just think of how many
yeah,
nonprofits don't ever get started or off the ground that could
right,
have done some real good just because, somebody really well meaning ran into some headway of the actual operational side of it.
right.
So I don't know. Sorry that
No, that
if you're looking for a guest idea, I don't have somebody, but go find one and get them on so I can
no,
listen to
I have a few in mind already, and it's also people that I know that if there were listeners that were like, "How do I? Hey, I heard you on the
it.
P1FC podcast. Like, how do I even? Where would I go for this or whatever?" It's always people that I know would be able to say, "Yeah, give me a call. Let's talk about it." So that's
Yeah.
the beautiful thing about the people that we do have partnership with is they buy into us and they buy into the idea of, helping the community. And that's what it's all about. It's wonderful. It's community. It's awesome. And this
I
community
know. I
is a
mean,
great one.
it's kind of the whole, it's like what we get around the fire to sing Kumbaya about, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah,
why
I
we're in this
know, right?
industry. Like,
It really is. And it's beautiful for sure.
I know. I hope you take this with the positive intent that it comes with. But I've made the statement many a time to friends that like working in this industry, I feel like I've met some of the most beautiful humans, some of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my
Yes.
life.
Hmm.
They could probably make 10 times more money in another industry.
For sure.
And it's like the choice to get up every single day and go work at a credit union or a community bank or a partner that serves them is so
Hmm.
much more than just that. And so to your point from earlier, like I feel like you attract a different type of personality. You attract a different type of person that wants to have a different type of conversation with people when they walk into the branch or they call in or they interact with us in any number of the different modes that we do, i.e. listening to our podcast,
Hmm.
and I want to give you this shout out because I think you should hear it, especially because you guys actually do your podcast like full blown, like camera crew in person. Your guest is in person.
Hmm.
Like folks that are listening, podcast, this is actually a ton of work to put on. There's a
Yeah.
lot of hours that go into the day just around the podcast. Tanis has a full-time job that is not managing a podcast,
Oh my
right?
gosh. Well,
And
like I
like,
said, I do not take credit for a lot of that. My marketing team really does help pave the way for
no, but
that.
but it still takes time out of your day to do your day job. It takes
Totally.
time out of your marketing
Totally.
team day, right? To produce all of this really high quality content that people would actually
Right.
find value in, consume, etc. So, I mean, back to, if you're listening and you're a credit union, like I really do, I really encourage you to produce this type of content to, like Tana said, meet members where they are, go find the mediums and the channels that they're in, produce valuable content for them. And you don't need to
Right.
be number one on Spotify. Like
Mhm.
you don't
That's
need
not the
to have
point.
an impact, but at the same time, like this is a lot of work. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And,
Yeah.
you're saying your team is bought in. Like they said, hey, we're going to put the effort into this, and you're
Mhm.
bought in, and you're like, hey, look, I'm going to take the time to, research my guests and prepare my thoughts and do the
Exactly.
interview and that kind of thing. And I think that's super cool. And you should get the kudos for that. And I want to see more
Thank you,
people
Josh.
doing this. So,
I
what
appreciate
would be
you.
your
No, for
advice
sure.
if somebody wanted to start a podcast at their credit union?
I
Besides
would
get your
say,
marketing team to do it.
I was gonna say they, if you don't have the brain like me, like I don't have the brain to be able to like look at the data and all the analytics that go with it to just be like, okay, who should we target? Like, who's our main audience? Like, they're just, oh, I wish I had the brain to think of those things because they're so intentional with, you know, data supported decisions that I'm not educated enough to make. So I would say if you don't know how to do that, find someone that is, because before you launch something, you need to know those things. You need to have a game plan of what and who and how. And that needs to be aligned before you can pitch something. Because
Yeah.
if they were to say, hey, Tan, like, come and host this podcast. We have a new podcast. This is what it's going to be about. We don't really exactly know what we're going to talk about yet, but like you should show up and be the host. Okay, cool. I don't have any context as to what I'm stepping into as far as how am I going to talk to people? What kind of tone am I going to have? There's so much that goes into the delivery of it. And I would be doing everyone an injustice if I didn't have that context to be able to properly deliver the podcast and the true meaning behind the podcast. So do your research, know what you want to talk about, know how you want to deliver it. And if it's not going to be you delivering it, find the right person to do that because it's very important. Very, very important. Not only, I would say the research behind the scenes before you launch is more important for the foundation of the podcast. And then your delivery is 1000%. Who are the people going to see and hear? Like, that's important. So I always got to make sure I have like my eyebrows waxed, my hair better be looking good. I better be knowing what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to it. Like you said, it's not so much making sure I, can communicate effectively, but I gotta be presentable as well. I have to represent the credit union in positive ways in more than one.
See, that's why I wear a hat, is to cover up as much as possible and make sure that if I go 3
Lucky.
weeks without a haircut, I don't look like a homeless guy hosting the
That's lucky.
podcast.
You're lucky you can throw on that. You can throw that on. They did give me a little bit of a budget for some swag that I got to purchase through our internal hub. And
like it.
that has been awesome because then I can obviously be dressed to impress. So
I like it.
yeah.
I think I would love to get just to your perspective too on, I think if you're going to launch something like this, like you were saying, you kind of need the backing of the organization to say, this is going to be important to us because this is a big undertaking. So how has just kind of like the executive leadership team at the credit union and kind of the strategic plan of the credit union, how has this kind of fed into that? What's been the support from that?
Right. Well, support is always there. I mean, the initiatives that we truly do follow, it's a domino effect, right? I mean, our leadership is fantastic with being aligned in what we're trying to do and who we're trying to reach. Financial well-being for all, another episode with our president and CEO, Chris Losa, he talks about that and how our main pillar is financial well-being for all. And it's how we operate. It's what we believe through and through. So leadership has been very supportive and on board with it. The logistics of it has been just, tossed into marketing because they are trusted as they should be because they're award-winning group. They are phenomenal. And I think it's important to note that they received that so much trust and I received trust as well because there is nothing more important than being able to support our communities. And if that's in a form of a podcast where you can tune in, either watch or listen and learn something new, it doesn't get much better than that. I mean, it really doesn't. And I think that it's all of our jobs to keep everybody in the know with the new modern technologies and the modern way of communicating with our members. And that has been received very well from leadership all the way to the top.
Glad you said that, Tanis. Like we were talking about, even as the host, I feel like you always take away so much from the podcast. And I don't know if I ever really actually thought about it that bluntly, but to be the host of the podcast, that's actually a really pretty cool honor from the standpoint of just the trust that your organization has in you,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like I
Big
was
time.
just,
I'm like,
I
thank you
was
for
with
trusting me.
Siva, our
Like,
CEO, on a trip
it's an honor
just
for
last
sure.
week. And we were talking about the podcast and I was doing the math. And so I've recorded over 120 episodes now.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we, they're over an hour each. And I was like doing the math on just how many days of my life, like how many days you would have to spend to like listen to every single one of our episodes start to finish.
Right.
Right. And it's like multiple days now, but I never really thought about it the way until you said it, the way that that's that many days of content of me talking where I'm trusted that my organization like respects what I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to say. And it's all freely. I mean, this is just,
Right.
we're going to take this episode and we're going to push it out to the world, and anything and everything that I've said, you know, whether you decide that it's, represented as my personal opinion or the profession or the opinion of our organization, like my
Right.
organization has entrusted me with that. And that's a
Right.
really cool honor for you too. Like that P1 has said, hey, from the top to the bottom and all the way through, like we trust that we're going to create this long form content and we're going to put it out there for our members and prospective members to consume. Like that's a really cool honor. I never really thought about it that way. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Kudos to you, Josh.
I don't know about that. Maybe that just means Siba's never listened to an episode. He
Oh
doesn't know what
gosh.
I'm
No.
saying. No, hey, before I let you go, I wanted to come back to those two things that we parked. So I want to start with, because you've now brought it up even a few more times, right? Like, so you graduated at Lewiston, right?
Yes.
Yeah. See, I graduated Clarkston. So maybe you
Yeah,
got
I know.
better than I did,
Yeah, I
but
know.
I didn't get any financial education in high school, right? Did you?
I mean, not really. I remember
Yeah.
taking a Dave Ramsey class and I was like, what is this?
So,
Love Dave Ramsey. No bashing on Dave Ramsey, but still.
but still, like there could be more. There should be more,
Yeah. There
right?
should be more.
And so we were talking about how I think it's cool that P1 invested in like youth sports and brought you in, and they got a member out of that deal. They got an awesome rock star employee out of that deal. Like P1 won big time in that deal.
Oh,
But
that's nice.
it's about getting youth engaged and giving them education. And, I talk about this, and this is one of those, this is where I'm thankful for giving that trust that we were just talking about, right? Like I make the statement all the time. I'm sorry, but like we need to have uncomfortable conversations now before they get too uncomfortable. And many, many credit unions, not all, many, many credit unions and community banks don't have a plan for what happens when their aging account holders age out and that money leaves the institution because the younger generation that it's getting passed down to does not bank with you. That's a
Right.
problem,
For sure.
right? And so we have got to be actively, not passively, right? And hoping that the next generation of members come just because their parents had, right? It's different than when you and I were kids. It's
Right.
different. We don't just walk into the branch with our dad and say, hey, I have an account here, you open an account. It's so easy
Exactly.
for you to go on your phone and open an account anywhere the second you turn 18 without your parents even knowing about it, right? So we've got to actively be involved in getting in front of the next generation of members, or we ain't going to get them, right? So how have you guys kind of thought about and even, put your personal and professional lens on here? Like, what are your thoughts on, just being a part of the younger demographics, getting them engaged, getting them excited about credit unions? Like I said, obviously P1 has been, that's been top of mind for you all since you started making videos with, basketball stars to try and attract the youth. So
Right.
what are your thoughts
Well,
there?
I think honestly, like on besides the support with the younger generation, we offer so many other programs and support for financial literacy for our schools. We partner with a company called Bazing, and it provides full financial literacy to where our branch managers and community relation members go and actually present to classes. So that I can only imagine puts it in directly to that student's brain. I remember that really cool dude that came and talked to our class, and he like brought candy and stuff, and like he was super cool. He was at FUNFCU. Like that's where I'll go. Like he taught me about balancing a checkbook, that I might not need to do that in this world that we live in now today, but I know how to now, or I know how to write a check, or I know why it's important to not buy that super old car. And maybe it's better to buy like a newer car, and the reasons why, or just kind of like that coaching aspect and like that big sister type thing.
Yeah.
I think that has been very beneficial because we are very intentional about getting into our schools and guiding the younger generation with the hopes. A little bit of that is hope that they remember that and it sticks with them and they decide to open their first account up with us. So I think the main goal is to get those accounts, but also provide that financial literacy to these younger kids, because they might not get it at home, or they might not have the means to be able to listen to a podcast or whatever that looks like. But it starts with being intentional and getting out there and actually living through the movement of what we're trying to do. And we do a really good job at that. We really do, being involved in our schools big time.
Well, and that kind of also comes back to what the other thing that we parked, right? Which is there's certain times and certain conversations that I think just don't happen self-service and digitally, right? They need to happen a lot of times in person, or at least with a much more human touch or human element to it. And that's one of them, right? Is starting to attract our youth and bring them in. And yeah, look, you've got an uphill battle fighting all of the marketing and the marketing dollars that are thrown at platforms like Instagram and TikTok for, kids to go join Chime or to use Venmo as their primary bank relationship and all of those things. You've got to combat that. But if we can start to have the deeper conversations, and it's like, hey, look, we may realize that you may just because it's, so incredibly in your face, so many of your friends are doing it, that you're going to get a relationship with Chime and everything. Well, that's fine. Right. We just want you to know that we're here. And then once we start to have some of those opportunities to have bigger life events, Chime's not going to be there to sit down and have a conversation with them.
No.
But
and unfortunately, I'm hoping that, the rock bottom situations don't have to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Before they walk through our doors or get a call.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly it too, right? It's like, so unfortunately, when you hit those rock bottom scenarios, that's where the credit union is going to win time and time again, like all day, every day. Like it's not a fair fight, right? But if we can get to them before that, like if they can become a member of P1FCU before the rock bottom, there's a way better chance. Like I'd love to see the data on it. There's a way better chance that they're never going to hit the rock bottom.
Right.
Or if they do, it's going to be a lot lower, or it's going to be a lot less, or not as intense as it would have been without them. So yeah, I think it's really important to think about the relationship of all the different interactions that we have with members, and everything from the super simple self-service type of stuff that, we just want them to be able to digitally go and do on their own, to there's a reason that we're a credit. There's a reason that we have a mission. There's a reason that we have, our values as they are, and it's to help people. And so we're going to look for opportunities to extend and go beyond just a digital self-service relationship and really help people.
Absolutely. People helping people.
You just drop the mic there.
Right.
Tanis, it's been such a blast just having you on the podcast. And again, I'll say it one more time. Like, thank you. I think what you're doing is really, really cool. I think it's a service that needs to be done. I think it's a really cool example to be setting for other financial institutions that really want to, like we were saying, even in introducing you, like make it more than just words, like take action on the things. And when we say things like we're here to empower the financial health of our people in our communities, like this is one of the ways that you and your credit union are like stepping up to the plate and actually doing it. So it's super rad. thank you for coming and talking about it and sharing it with us.
Thank
Before I let you
you.
go, I got 2 final questions for you.
Okay.
So where do you go to get information outside of talking to your guests? What type of stuff do you follow to keep yourself up to date on the industry?
Yeah, I'm sure a common answer to this is probably, LinkedIn is a really, really great way to stay up on specifically credit union kind of like movement updates. But me, I really, as cash management officer, I'm the only cash management officer here at the credit union. So credit union wide. So I have to really focus and be strategic with what avenues I'm kind of focusing on. So there's a company called True Treasury, and they have a forum and a lot of good support with industry standard and really just updates in that industry. And I really stay true to that because it's good, valuable, and accurate information for my field of work. So to remain the subject matter expert, I do stick up to the True Treasury forums to keep me in the loop.
Yeah, shout out to that group. They're good.
Yeah,
folks.
for sure.
Well, people want to connect with you and they want to learn more about you. They want to learn more about P1FCU, or if they want to find your podcast, how can they do
Yeah.
that?
You can find me on all social medias. My name is pretty rare. So as long as you got the spelling right, you can probably find me LinkedIn. You can subscribe to our podcast. You can go to p1fcu.org, or you can also search it on all the major outlets. So Spotify, Apple, YouTube, I missing one. No, I think that's it. But yeah, you just search in any of those vehicles and you'll find it. Making sense of money.
I'm still like, by the way, I meant to say this earlier. I'm like blown away that nobody had that before you. It's such a genius
I know,
name.
right? It really is.
Like, how did nobody? Apparently, it was just waiting for you guys
Telling
to come
you.
along and take it. So
Our marketing team, man,
yeah, it's super cool.
they've got the brain.
Well, thank you again for coming and being a guest here on the Digital Banking Podcast. And yeah, do yourself a favor, tune in to Tanis as well on Making Sense Money. Thanks for being a guest, Tanis.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Banking Podcast powered by Typho. Find more episodes on digitalbankingpodcast.com or subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.